Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows It's Just Life, the podcast. Thank you for listening today. On today's episode, I am joined by none other than my dad. Welcome to the show, Dad.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here.
All right. So, Dad, I know you've heard a couple of episodes, but just to start us off, I'll reiterate that the purpose of the show is to figure out life. I admit that I don't know and that I'm still learning about everything. This show is a public expression of that learning process. So I welcome you to this space, and I welcome you to challenge me and check me along the way as we kind of just explore life. And I think it's going to be really fun to kind of just explore, you know, your life as you've gone through things. And, you know, me being a mid-30s adult with a kid now and everything, like my perspective on life is different, but I can remember you at my age now, so it'll be interesting to kind of go through some of life's lessons and things, you know, here in this space. So I'm looking forward to that. Whenever I have a guest, I always like to check in and just see where you're at. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's spring in Silver Spring, and it's a good time to be here. I'm glad I made it through the cold and the horrible winters. I don't like winters anymore. So.
Yeah. So Dad, so we'll probably get to it later, but Dad, you basically more recently have lived in what is called Central America. I call it Southern North America because that's anyway. You lived for a brief time in Ecuador, but mostly you've been in Nicaragua, and then more recently you were in Guatemala for a year and Dominican Republic for a year and a half, and you're here in the States. You've been here for about 6 months, and you're gonna go back home to Nicaragua soon, depending COVID stuff and whatever. So yeah, you've been accustomed to some warmer weather the last half a decade.
And my knees and my bones don't like the cold here. So whenever I plan to come back when it's in the warmer climates, in the summertime and the fall time.
And you even got to cheat for a little bit because from like January into February this year, you were in Maui with all your siblings and everything. Right. So yeah, that you didn't even really get all the winter.
That helped out a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. Well, I'm glad that you've been here. So yeah, it's just been great having you here. I know Avery really appreciates it. And I did too. I mean, I haven't gone grocery shopping in like forever, which has been fantastic. Just to have, and you know what's funny too? I noticed how similar we are in ways that like I wouldn't have known. Like there's stuff, and it's not even things that you taught me. It's just that like, you know, I'm the kind of guy that like, oh, when I'm starting to get low on olive oil, I'm gonna buy a big old thing of olive oil, and I'm not even out yet because I know I'm about to be out, and when I'm out, I don't want to be out and need it. So it's like I just kind of do that kind of thing. And I noticed you do the exact same thing. And I'm like, man, this is great. Like, and I guess I got it from you, but like.
But I assumed everybody did that, but everybody doesn't. I've learned that people, like Troy, for instance, you know, he would just run out. And I don't like running out. If I expect to have something there, I want to have it there. I don't want to have to be going out at the last minute getting something or not being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So yeah,
Troy being my younger brother, the middle of the three of us. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Just for the sake of this podcast being about life in its totality, we can still kind of go back into your childhood and just adolescence, you know, high school, college, professional life, and now retirement, you know, and just kind of skim through a bunch of those things, highlight any key lessons learned or whatever, and just kind of go from there as a starting point.
Sure.
So from Newport, Rhode Island, and that's a funny thing too, because most people don't think of Newport, but most people don't think of Rhode Island. Let's be honest.
Right.
People don't really think about Rhode Island at all, even though it's a very historic state and it's a very, you know, very cool place to be. It's I think they say it's the most shoreline per square mile or something like that. Is that true?
Yeah, you're right. I think that's true. The most shoreline per square mile of any state, because it's all jig-jagged. It's all in Newport, where I grew up, is an island. So and it used to be called Newport, Rhode Island, and Providence Plantations. It had the longest name for the smallest state in the entire country.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think just last summer they started the process to actually remove the plantations part from the name because, I mean, obviously, in the summer of Black Lives Matter becoming, a widely accepted idea, the idea that a state had the word plantation in its name was like, oh yeah, maybe we should change that. Although I do know people who are like, no, don't change it, keep it there to remind us that yes, Rhode Island, a northern state, had plantations, because a lot of people think of slavery and all that stuff as a southern thing, but things were just as bad in the north at various points in history actually throughout. But anyway, so that's cool. So I guess just take us back to your childhood and anything that comes up, any stories or anything that you think are worth sharing, I guess.
I remember growing up with my brothers. I come from a large family. There was 7 of us kids, and a lot of my youth was at the boys' club. As we got older, being on an island, my dad wanted us all to learn how to swim. So we would go to the boys' clubs almost every day. And my dad never learned how to swim. His dad took him to a wharf in Newport and pushed him into the water and said, "Swim, boy, swim." And my dad almost drowned. And from that point on, he has a fear of the water. He never learned how to swim, but he knew that we should learn how to swim. So he took us to the boys' clubs almost every day. We took swim lessons for 3 years or more and never learned how to swim. But after the swim lessons, there was free swim. So we loved the water. We were like water rats. You couldn't get us out of the water. And I remember once, in order to go to the deep end, to prove you're a swimmer, at the very beginning of each swim session, the free swim, you would have to swim a width and the length of the pool. And me and my brothers couldn't swim, so we wouldn't do it. But one time, I don't know how old we were, my youngest brother, Raymond, swam it. He did the dog paddle. It took forever. And then Wayne did it. My other brother, Wayne, did it. And I said, "This is impossible. We can't swim. This is impossible. This is a mistake."
And your 2 younger brothers just did it.
My 2 younger brothers did it. I said, "I'm not doing it." I wasn't prepared. I wasn't mentally prepared. I said, "If they do it tomorrow, then I'll try it." And sure enough, the next day, they did it, the dog paddle. And then both of them, and I said, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. I'm the oldest of the 3, and I'm not going to let them embarrass me by doing something I can't do. So sure enough, I did the dog paddle, kept my head above the water the whole time doing the dog paddle, and I did it. And from there, I got the courage to experiment more. I knew I could float. And that led me on to actual swimming. After years of lessons, I never really learned, but I learned on my own from just doing that, the dog paddle, going in the deep end and staying close to the edge because I didn't want to go.
You needed a safety net.
I didn't want to go too far from the edge. But yeah, the boys' clubs did a lot for us growing up. We spent a lot of time there. And we used to sell candy. The boys' clubs had a summer camp. And you could sell candy, and if you sold so much candy, you could get a week at camp. And there was a prize for whoever sold the most candy. So my dad suggested that you just put my oldest brother's name on the list, Steve, and sell candy. But all of us were going to sell candy under Steve's name. And we sold candy like you wouldn't believe. We sold so much candy. We sold the heck out of the candy. All of us, we had a shopping cart. We'd go all over Newport.
Where'd you get the shopping cart from?
From right across the street. A&P right across the street. And we were just crazy. And we were really good sales kids. And we sold the heck out of it. We sold so much candy that it was impossible for anybody to even come close. The second person was so far down on the list.
Probably a quarter of the sales, huh?
Yeah, or a tenth of it. And also we saw so much candy that we could all go to summer camp for free the whole year.
Wow.
The whole summer. And we had extra weeks. So we gave some weeks to some of our friends in the projects in the Chapel Terrace projects. We gave some of the kids there weeks and weeks of summer camp for free because we had so many to spare. And we won a TV out of the thing. We won a little red TV. And TV was a big deal in our family because we had one TV and it would break. And when it would break, my dad wouldn't fix it for months. and so we would go without TV.
How many channels? Was it color TV at this point, or is it?
It was color TV.
Color TV?
I think it was color TV, but it was like 3 channels. And in Newport, you could barely get the third. Newport, because it's away from the city of Providence, the signal strength wasn't that good for one of the channels. So it's pretty much 2 channels and then PBS which always came in gray and snowy and hazy.
That's crazy.
So, but when we got our own TV, it was our own TV. It wasn't Dad's TV. It was our own TV, and that was great. It was a little portable red TV.
That's good.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned both of those, because I mean, with Avery, I definitely want him to swim. I swam. Me and all of my siblings swim. Kendra, I would say, was the fish by far out of the 3 of us. I remember when we were like the one time we went to Maui to visit family, and like when I was in like 04, 05, she was way more comfortable than I. She was 8 years younger than me. She was way more comfortable snorkeling, and she would just hold her breath and dive down and swim next to the turtles and stuff. And I was like, I'm not comfortable with all that. And I'm 8 years older than her. So I kind of had my own moment where I was like, this younger sibling of mine is a fish. Mm-hmm. But for Avery, he's 7 now, and for, I kind of beat myself up about it a little bit, but he doesn't know how to swim yet. He's not that comfortable in water. He loves water, but he just doesn't know how to swim. He doesn't know how to hold his breath and like, fully submerge his head and stuff like that. We've had progress with some of those things, but then the pandemic happened and he hasn't, pools were closed. And so that's something I kind of beat myself up about, because I know it's fairly, well, it's a thing that, it's not a given that Black people know how to swim. And I definitely want to kind of continue that legacy for sure, and make sure he's extremely comfortable in water, whether it's a pool, a beach, whatever. So yeah, that's something that I think is maybe the lessons aren't the way to go. Maybe just
well, it worked for you. When we moved to Tanglewood, your mom insisted that you learn how to swim, because the Tanglewood had a pool, and so if we're going to be going to the pool, you need to learn how to swim. And I think you were 8 at the time, and we went to lessons. Of course, you didn't want to go at first. You didn't want to swim, or just, you had trouble transitioning. So when you were playing with your Legos or whatever you were playing with, and then it was time to go to swim lessons, you didn't want to go, but you did, and she sort of forced you. You were timid at first, and she gently nudged and pushed you to continue, and you did, and you liked the coach. The coach was really good, and you learned to swim, and then. That's all she wanted. That's all we wanted, is you to learn how to swim. But then you went on the swim team, and then we became a swim team family from that point on. And Troy learned how to swim at 6 or 7.
Yeah, and then Kendra was swimming probably about like 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We all did swim team at least for a bit, and you were involved too. Then this is the neighborhood swim team. In terms of the pool was affiliated with our neighborhood. It wasn't a private. Well, I guess it's private in the sense that you had to live in the neighborhood to have access to it, but. We didn't have to pay any, like most pools that are private clubs have a more of an exorbitant cost of entry, but by being neighborhood kids, it was
included in the HOA fees,
right.
I guess no,
neighborhood
association fees. Yeah.
So that was cool to be able to have that opportunity, and I know you were really involved, like stroke and turn. You were somebody that when we had the swim meets, you would be part of the either being a timer, or you were always doing something, and Mom was always involved too. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of summers for sure. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
But also, boys clubs, they started to do boxing, and this was, I guess, around the time Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay was coming up and doing good, and the boys club started teaching boxing, and my dad would teach us boxing, or a little bit, or get us prepared to box by buying us stuff for Christmas, like a little punching bag and gloves and stuff like that we would use for a while and then not use at all. But eventually, we were really interested in the boys clubs, but then none of us went to. I think we tried it in the beginning, but it was just too hard. I mean, the kids that could box, the competition was just too severe. So we sort of like dropped out. But we were interested in. So on our own, we would just practice boxing and try to become a better boxer, be able to defend yourselves better, and all that. But And then we would go to the boxing matches at the boys' clubs, which were really great.
That's cool. See, that's the kind of stuff that I wish we had more. Well, I guess we have sports and stuff, but the boxing isn't really as much of a thing anymore. I feel like that's definitely a much more personal community. It just feels like a community thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we have. I mean, you can do baseball and football and whatever, and I guess that's
nowadays the kids have a lot more options to really organize sports outdoors, like baseball, soccer, even t-ball for kids younger. Yeah. Back then, there was very little of that. The boys' clubs was one of the few outlets that you had to really participate in things.
Yeah. Anything else from early years of growing up?
Monopoly.
Oh God,
the Carsons and Monopoly.
I have some experience with that, but that might be secondhand.
Yeah, we would play Monopoly. It was one of our favorite games as kids, and it would get heated at times.
At times,
it would get. We were very, very competitive and all that. And I remember a couple of times. I remember a time when I got in a fight with my older brother. And this was right around the time where boys' clubs had the boxing, and we were learning how to box on our own and things like that. But we got in a fight, and it was a fist fight. And I remember hitting him in the jaw and knocking one of his teeth out. And I was shocked. I was completely shocked and a little bit afraid that he's going to really come at me. But he didn't, and I think from that point I gained a little respect with my brothers. I'd be like, don't mess with me, because I was always the quiet one. I was shyer than the rest, and with asthma and stuff like that, I was sometimes not a part. You had to sit out of things and stuff like that. So. But that was a turning point with me. And I also remember finding my younger brother. I don't know if it was over in Monopoly. I forget what it was over. But, of course, boys would always be fighting and stuff like that. And we were out in the backyard fighting. And he was mad at me for something. And he was wrong. I didn't do it. He had the wrong person. But he was livid.
Magic or Ray?
Magic. Yeah. He was going to, And I had him by a chokehold, and we learned these chokeholds from wrestling and stuff like that. I had him by this chokehold, it was a lock. He couldn't get out of it, and he kept thrashing all around, and I was afraid. He was like holding a tiger, and I was afraid if I let him go. So I started choking him, slowly choking him. I said, "Are you going to calm down?" And I had to choke him until he could barely breathe. And I said, "Okay, I want to loosen up a little bit." And I would loosen up a little bit, and then a little bit at a time until he calmed down. And I finally let him go. But I was scared to let him go because he was just so mad, and I thought he was going to kill me. So I said, I have to kill him before he kills me.
But something about brothers, siblings in general, probably.
Yeah.
Though I don't think I mean, I didn't fight with my siblings anywhere near to that degree. Not that I know of. I should maybe ask Troy about that.
Yeah, he might have a different opinion.
Maybe Mom remembers too. I don't know. I don't think we did. But anyway. Yeah, I guess that kind of rolls into the next one about... So I recently read A Will to Change by Bell Hooks, which talks about masculinity, love, and really how... Well, I'll couple that one, and I know I've already mentioned on the show that I've read Rescue Menachem's My Grandmother's Hands. Both of those speak about trauma and how, and from one of them is from the racial perspective. Bell Hooks is from a patriarchal perspective about how we receive trauma and learn about white supremacy and patriarchy through traumas. But really, trauma could just be. It doesn't have to be into either of those contexts. And I was thinking back about my life. And I can honestly say that there wasn't a whole lot of trauma in my upbringing. And I think a lot of people would look at my upbringing as a kid, 2-parent household. You were an engineer. I know you weren't an engineer your entire career, but you had both of you were college educated. Mom was at home for a little bit, and lived in a single family house in a nice neighborhood that had a pool. And, there was a lot of surface things that spoke to privilege, which was certainly privilege. But I think what's maybe the deeper privilege that I hadn't really had perspective on is the lack of trauma that I had growing up from an emotional standpoint. Like, home was really a safe space. And I think because people might have had the same aesthetic privileges as I did, but they might have still had traumas in their homes. And I know there were kids in my neighborhood specifically, that had some of those things going on, whether it was like racial trauma or patriarchal trauma or just mental health traumas, or, dealing with parents who had challenges or were just dealing with drugs or alcohol or something like that. So I know that those things were there. And so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, were there traumas that you had growing up, and how did that influence, your parenting philosophy with us? Because I had the privilege of not really having a whole lot of trauma at all, in terms of like, any of those things. So do you have anything that you can think of?
Yeah, there was trauma at home. My dad was difficult to live with. My dad was raising 7 kids, so he was working 2 jobs. He was working at the post office and driving the school bus on after hours to the colleges and stuff like that, or almost always working 2 jobs. And sometimes there was a point where he was more of a social drinker at the time. I mean, after work, the post office had a bowling club, and they would go bowling after work, and they go bowling, and they get drunk, and he'd come home drunk. And sometimes he was a good drunk, and sometimes he was a bad drunk. And when he was a bad drunk, we were in fear because he would come home, and we all had chores, and we had a chore schedule, a chore rotation. But the chores that you would get in trouble for not doing was the kitchen. Washing the dishes, drying the dishes, sweeping the floor, cleaning the kitchen. And he'd come home at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning, drunk and mad, maybe because he lost or something like that in bowling. I don't know what. But he'd come home drunk and mad, and he would pull us out of the bed, yell and scream, and pull us out of bed. And whoever was responsible for doing the kitchen, there's usually 2 of us for the kitchen chores. And he'd make us, wash the dishes, wash and scrub and clean everything. And not just clean normal, but clean thorough cleaning. I mean, like the spring cleaning type of cleaning in the kitchen and all this. And sometimes he would come home and beat my mom. And it wouldn't involve us, but he'd come home and beat my mom. And
did y'all see it or just hear it?
We just hear it, and we were so scared, and we were terrified. And so whenever he came home, we were just terrified. He might wake us up coming home, but we would just stay in bed and sort of just, I hope it's not me. I hope it's not me. I hope it doesn't bother mom. I hope it doesn't bother mom. And it was awful. And we always thought, well, why doesn't she leave him? Well, she should leave him. She shouldn't put up with this. And many times, working 2 jobs, we liked it because he wasn't home. He wasn't home to cause havoc and tell us not to watch TV and just have us do extra chores and do yard work and stuff like that. So we liked when he wasn't home, and whenever he came home, we all went scampering.
All right, gotta go play.
Like rats running away.
Yeah.
But he was also a good dad. I mean, he taught me a lot of lessons. One of the things he taught me was this is good and bad. He taught me not to be satisfied, not to be with what you did. There's always a better way you can do things. So he always had you thinking. He always had you thinking about, how can this be better? How can this be better? This is good, but it could be better. And so even when you did something, he never gave us praise. He never said good job. He seldom said it was a good job. We might do something when he's not there, and he comes home and you're all proud that you did this or you cleaned this or whatever, and then he would say, oh, but you missed here, or you could have done it this way or whatever. And so it was never positive reinforcement. It seemed to always be more of a negative reinforcement than a positive reinforcement. It could have been better. You could have done better. But it got us thinking all the time that. So when we do things with a lot of thought in it, and not just haphazardly do something. And I realized that helps out a lot, because there's little details in life that you're more conscious of coming from that perspective. And I think that's why I became an engineer, and that's what helped me as an engineer. And that's helped me like all through life, being detail oriented, whereas a lot of people don't pay attention to the details. And it's truly the devil's in the details. You could see something at one level, but when you get down into the details, things aren't what they seem to be. And it fools so many people in life.
And I can see how, as a kid, you want a degree of praise, and you want your dad, your parents in general, but your dad particularly as a boy to be proud of you. And so I get how that could be negative, but yeah, that's still a good trait to have in terms of being able to strive for the best. It helps you take criticism too. I mean, you weren't the kid in college or in the professional world who couldn't take criticism from a teacher or a boss, because your dad gave that to you your whole life. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm used to not doing things perfectly. Right. So that I guess there's some value to that too. I guess I see what you mean there.
And I got the positive reinforcement from my mom. My mom was always very positive. But I also remember one of the biggest things I got from my dad was emotions, controlling my emotions. I got in trouble in school because something happened and I was embarrassed, and I was really embarrassed. I didn't want to do something, or something happened. I can't remember the specifics, but I had a thing. I had to get my parents to sign it, and I was so afraid to take it to my dad and have my dad to sign. I thought he was gonna, really whip me or whatever. But what he told me was that embarrassment. He said, you weren't embarrassed. You let yourself be embarrassed by whatever you did or whatever happened. You have control over that. You don't have to let yourself be embarrassed, but you let yourself be embarrassed, or you let yourself be ashamed. And I thought about that, and it was very powerful that you have power over the outside, because as a black person growing up in Newport, you get a lot of, even Newport is a very liberal northern town, but there's racism everywhere. And growing up in a place where there's very few black people, in a 95% white town, there's all kinds of outside forces that could take you down. And that was a very powerful lesson, that you let yourself be embarrassed. And I said, wow. I mean, that's a different way of looking at it. I said, and that from that point on, I tried to say, okay, I could fall and trip or whatever, and everybody's laughing, and I don't have to be embarrassed by it. I don't have to let myself be embarrassed. I can just say, oh, I fell, and they're laughing, but I'm not going to let them bother me.
Yeah, don't give them that energy.
Exactly. It's like water off a duck's back. And that has helped me through all kinds of situations in life.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's one that my kid needs to get. You've been here for some of that, trying to help him understand that, like, everybody has emotions, and they're a natural part of being human, and you're entitled to the full range of emotions. I know being black and being a man, like, there's pressures to not exhibit certain emotions like anger and whatever. So it's I want to encourage him to experience all the emotions, but to learn how to respond effectively to them. Mm-hmm. And with him, it's, I use the analogy of, like, and I think we got this from a meditation, where emotions are clouds that pass above your head. Mm-hmm. And, depending on what kind of emotion they are, you either want to let it pass. Like, if it's a negative emotion, let it go, just let it go, acknowledge it, experience it for the moment that it's there, but let it go. Just breathe through it, whatever it is. And for him, I know he gets upset and angry sometimes. And we use the analogy of, like, if you hold on to a negative cloud, it's going to rain on you, and then your whole body's wet and it's hard to get dry. So, like, the idea is to try to let that cloud go before it rains on you. And then it impacts your day, your mood, your body, you physically manifest that. So, but just, giving him the same knowledge that he has the power to, control control how he experiences emotions and how he responds to them. Yeah, that's a big one.
There's certain emotions that you really don't have as much control over, especially when it's family and friends, people that you really care about, like love and sometimes anger. Anger, but some things you just don't have as much control over. It's just
Yeah.
especially with people you're close to. But if it's just the public or work people or whatever, you can control those a lot more.
That's a good point. Yeah, the intimacy definitely ratchets up the sensitivity and the impact of the emotional response, because
There's more invested. It's more invested. Your family, your wife, your husband, your wife. It's so much harder to control those emotions, and you probably shouldn't. You should probably express yourself the way as much as possible, to be honest with each other and not hide from each other how you feel.
yeah, that's a good point. Anything else as a kid? Any other traumas or stresses?
I remember being shy. I remember I was so afraid to to stand up in front of class and give a book report. I would go through so much stress anytime I had to do this, and I remember The Grapes of Wrath. I read the book The Grapes of Wrath, and I said I should go first and just get it over with. So there's no comparison. I'm the first guy.
Yeah.
And then I would chicken out and chicken out and chicken out, and then finally I was last.
The last one.
And I was prepared. I had my cards. I said I don't want to read my cards, but I want to talk. You know, I know the material. I was one of the few books I read completely to the end. I like the book a lot, and so I could speak well of it. But I remember I got up there and I froze, and I was sweating, and I started just reading the card, and I don't read very well out loud very well, especially at the time, because I was a slow reader, a very slow reader, and not a very good reader. So I was just reading the cards, and it was so boring. I could tell, and I just trying to get through it. Just read the cards and get through it. I was sweating sweating buckets, and I never forget that moment. It was just one of the there was others, but this one was the worst one. It was The Grapes of Wrath was the book, and I was the very last one to present, and I was.
And I know you've been in leadership and stuff like that in your professional career. Did you? Since I would guess that you kind of got through that to some degree. I know. Well, I know you facilitated trainings and stuff. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I got through it in college, but even in college, I wasn't quite there yet. I think after college and working in the real world, I got there. But in college, I would run for office. Like we had a group for minorities called Uhuru Sasa, and everybody said I should run for president but I said no, I don't want to be president. I don't want to be the one in the spotlight. I'd rather be vice president. So I would team up with somebody that was good and liked the visibility and liked the popularity and all that. And I said, I'll be your vice president, but I'll give you the ideas, and I can feed you my ideas and my thoughts, but I don't want to be the guy. So I was still somewhat shy in college, but not shy enough not to take a position, not to be on the a leadership team.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good segue. I mean, so tell me about college. I mean, you're a black kid from Newport, Rhode Island. Oh, both of your parents went to college. Both graduated from college. So that was not a new phenomenon in your family. And so I guess just tell me about, your transition into college, how you chose your major, and yeah.
Well, because both of my parents went to college, especially for my mom, it was taken for granted that we were all going to college. There was not a question at all. In high school, we were all in college prep classes and things like that, and we got good grades without really studying that much. It was pretty easy to get good grades. and it was there's just no question about it. It wasn't. My mom would always ask, "What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?" Oh, constantly asking us that through our lives, from when we were like 5 years old up until we were teenagers. I could always remember, and it got you thinking about the future, thinking about your career, thinking about a path, a plan for your life. In high school, when you start thinking about college, didn't know what I wanted to major in. I liked a lot of things. I liked music. I like mechanical drawing. I liked math. I liked science. I liked a lot of things, and so, of course, the guidance counselor is going to push me towards things that they think a black kid could do, like music, and so I said, no, I don't want to do music. I love music, but I don't want to do music because I don't want to be a poor musician. I don't want to spend all this time going to college and come out not with a job. And so she gave me the book of careers. First I wanted to be an architect. I saw an architect and I said, yeah, I like mechanical drawing. I like drawing things, like I wouldn't mind drawing houses and buildings and stuff like that. But then I saw the job prospect. The job prospect was poor for architects. And I saw engineering. I said, engineering? What's engineering? And I read about engineering, and I saw the job prospects for engineering was high. I mean, and so I said, okay, I'll major in engineering. And the guidance counselor said, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do that? It's very hard. It's very challenging. I said, okay, then I want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't want me to do it, then that's what I want to do.
Then thank you for encouraging me to get it done.
Exactly. So I was looking for engineering schools, and where I really wanted to go was Annapolis, the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Because I knew my dad didn't have money for college. My family didn't have money for college, but I knew Annapolis was free. If you got accepted, you could go for free, and they had a very good engineering schools. Mm-hmm. And so to get accepted to Annapolis, you have to have the senators from your state recommend 2 people. And so we applied for that, and I got a second alternative nomination from my senator.
So you were close?
I was somewhat close, but
I got second alternative. You weren't the first alternative.
Yeah. So the 2 that get selected, and is the first alternative, and I was the second alternative. So I was, and so
that's not bad though, out of the state though.
Yeah. At the time, they said, well, your second alternative, what you could do is you can go to the Naval Academy Prep School in Newport for 9 months, and then after 9 months, if a spot opens up, you can go right in. If after the first alternative, the second alternative can go right in or whatever. And then at the time, I was trying University of Rhode Island. It's where my older brother went. He was studying pharmacy there.
So you already decided to start there at URI?
URI was my backup school.
Right. So I guess when this prep option was, you had already needed to choose what you were going to do. You had already graduated high school, and you were already...
No, it was in the process of graduating, and I got the results back from the senator that I was a second alternate. So I said, okay. So either, and then I got accepted to the University of Rhode Island.
Got it.
So my choices were, and a couple of other schools. So my choices were Naval Academy Prep School for 9 months, and there's no guarantee that I'm going to be accepted after 9 months, or the University of Rhode Island. And the thing about the Naval Academy Prep School, it's in Newport. So I'm not leaving home. I'm living at home with my parents, going to this prep school with no guarantee. And at the time at URI, I had there was the BEOG grant. So
what does that stand for?
Basic Opportunity Educational Grant.
Basic BEOG, Basic Education
Opportunity Grant.
Okay.
So and so I got that because my dad's income and the number of kids we had and all that, we qualified for pretty much a full ride to University of Rhode Island, the state school, and so I decided to study engineering there.
Cool. Was Nesby there? Well, wait, no, that would have been in the late 70s. So like I know Nesby started. Then the National Society of Black Engineers started at Purdue, I want to say, in 71. Now Maryland. We our NSBE chapter was called Black Engineering Society, Black Engineering Society, because we actually started in 1968 before NSBE was even a thing. So we are most college campuses have a NSBE chapter, and it's called NSBE. We're called BES, but we're certified as a NSBE chapter. Got to point that out. And so I was involved with that when I was in college. But was there even were there even enough black kids in engineering to have NSBE or anything like that?
There was two of us, two black kids in engineering. 1980, when I was
all of engineering or mechanical engineering specifically, or the entire engineering?
I think in all of engineering.
Oh wow!
There was two black, me and Charlie Dingus, and who's from Newport as well. And then there was a couple of women in engineering, one or two in mechanical engineering. There might have been 5 women.
What, white women or black
white
women?
Yeah. No, we were the only black kids.
Yeah, so white women. Okay,
yeah.
wow.
Out of all of engineering, so there was no NSBE, there was no an engineering society of 2.
That's crazy. Yeah, I figured that would be the case because I know URI is more diverse now, but I in the 70s, I'm sure.
And for at URI, there was a group that really helped me out a lot. It's called Talent Development, and it's sort of like it was made for, and I think there was scholarship money with them as well, but it was made for kids minority kids, white and black and whatever, minority kids that were poor and they weren't quite academically prepared for college, but got accepted to college, And so so we had to go to summer school before college and study English and math and stuff like that to get our basics up to snuff. And for me, I was in college prep, so I was in this program, and all of this was easy for me. But for a lot of the
they made you because you were doing college prep in high school. So did you even really need that? So you clearly didn't even really need that.
No, I was only in the program for the financial support of the program. I didn't need the talent development. The other kids, a lot of good friends of mine, my best friend from my wedding, he went to a good school in Providence, but he didn't need it as much, but he needed it a little bit. But a lot of the kids weren't in college prep and had maybe their first members of the family ever to go to college, and so they're coming from schools that weren't very good academically, so they needed the prep, and the program offered pre-matric courses, and then they offered tutoring along the way, and I remember during the year getting some tutoring in the beginning and stuff like that. But having the counselors there saying, "Are you sure you want to do engineering?"
And these are white counselors?
Yeah. And they were long-haired, hippie type, white liberals, and they said, "Are you sure you want to do engineering?" He said, "I think you should do music." And the more people were trying to push me away from the engineering, the more I wanted to do it. I said, because I've always believed in the road less traveled. I don't want to take the road everybody else takes. I want to take a different road, the road less traveled. And if engineering is the road less traveled, that's the road I want to take for me.
Yeah. And
so, but yeah, they were trying to push me out of engineering. It would have been easier for them because they want successes. This was a program, and they want a higher graduation percentage. They're always struggling to get, to get the funding for the program to prove that it's effective.
Yeah.
So the more people that can graduate, and they thought that if I majored in something else, it would be easier for me to graduate and get the numbers up than engineering, mechanical engineering. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And then what about? I know from there, you moved to Maryland, married my mom, and all that. So how, like, in terms of, and you transitioned. You were in engineering, but then you transitioned out of engineering, self-taught in IT and security stuff. Which, like, as a kid, I kind of knew you were always studying and reading stuff. But and then I can even remember all the books that you had up on the shelf in the office but now that I'm 30 something, I'm like, wait a minute, like, how did he do this? This is crazy, but yeah, so I guess, deciding to move to Maryland and get married and kids and all that. And I guess there's also a gap. I mean, y'all waited like 6 years. You got married in 80, had me Oh, I just
86.
gave my age. Yeah, you waited a few years before you had kids. So I don't know. Just how about that like entry into
the
life?
real world, the adult world.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, the golden age, 1980, was when recruiters would come in and you find a tie and suit to put on. There was 2 companies I was interested in, and I went for follow-up interviews. One was Vitro Corporation, which was in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the other one was DuPont in Delaware. And DuPont was more of industrial manufacturing place, and I would be a mechanical engineer in the factory on the line, and perhaps working shifts, different shifts, changing shifts. And I kind of was like that because it was real. But then Vitro had a solar program, a government contract. Vitro was a government contractor, primarily defense. They were working with the Trident submarines and Tomahawk missiles, the nuclear missiles on the submarines and things like that, and all that. And that was the bread and butter. That was mostly what they did. But they had a small little contract for solar energy from the Department of Energy. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into solar energy. So I accepted the job at Vitro. And that was 1980. And Carter had been president, and then Reagan became president. And Reagan wanted to get rid of the Department of Energy because he said the Department of Energy has not produced a single barrel of oil. and so he wanted to cut the Department of Energy, and in doing so, the program that I joined Vitro for was cut. And so, but when I joined, they said they're not accepting any new people in the solar department, but after 6 months you can transfer over. But 6 months later, we were getting engineers from the solar group into our group, and so
the writing was on the wall.
Yeah. I didn't like what I was doing. I enjoyed what I was doing, but I didn't like what I was doing. In other words, at Vitro, I was an engineer, and I was working with the Trident program, the Trident submarine program, and the Trident program is where the submarines have. The number's probably not classified anymore, but I don't know if it's classified. But each missile had a good number of warheads, nuclear warheads, and each one of those warheads could knock out a city, the size of New York. And so, the concept was mutual assured destruction, MAD.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I said, imagine working your whole career. I was a young engineer. I was like 20 something years old, and most of the kids were my dad's age. Most of the workers were engineers my dad's age that I was working with, and this was a new crop of young engineers coming into Vitro. There was like a handful of us, and these guys they weren't engineers by degree. They were engineers because they were in the military. And they were engineers by experience. Most of them were. And I thought, imagine working here, making a career out of this, working here and working for something that you wish would never, ever be used. Spending your whole life's work on something that you wish and hope would never, ever be used. And I said, to me, that's a waste. Waste of a life, waste of a talent, waste of a work. And so I never really liked working for a defense contractor. While I was there, I was doing engineering, and then they were opening up a new department for computers, networks, because they wanted to computerize some of the things they were doing. They wanted to get a local area network, and this was the very beginning of the PC. And I was always enthralled in PCs, the very first IBM PC, and before that, the Apple. And I always had my head in a computer magazine reading about the latest things, and things were happening every week. So you'd read, and then they improved the speed of this, and they got a new chip for that. And
foreshadowing to today, but go ahead.
yeah. But things were happening at such a rapid pace, and I would procrastinate on doing my real work because I had my head in a magazine or something about the new technology coming out. And so when this new group opened up, I switched I switched to the IT group, the fledgling IT group, which was really, really fledgling at the time. But it was at the very beginning of the whole IT revolution.
So what about like personal life, like marriage and kids and all that kind of stuff? What stands out to you in terms of that? I mean, from my perspective, it was the classic, sorry, the new age classic of like dad goes out and works and makes money, and then mom stays home with the kids and the house and all that. And that was true for us for a good chunk of my early childhood. And I know mom went back to work, got a master's, and started teaching a little bit later. But so while I didn't have any traumas around patriarchy or like boys don't cry or whatever, anything like that, like, you know, I definitely saw the patriarchal quote unquote norm of like of at least gender roles, which, you know, again, wasn't traumatic, but it was just a learning that was a thing. And so I don't know, was that planned? Did y'all like, was that something that y'all, because I know mom did work before I was born too. So
yeah.
So I know she was working at a
law firm. She was worked 5 years at the law firm. Your mom was we both were feminists. Your mom was a feminist, and she taught me feminism in college and all that. So she was and she's a very straightforward, determined person in terms of roles and stuff like that, in terms of marriage and responsibilities. And so being feminists, we thought everything should be equal, you know, split down the middle. And when we first got married, the deal was that, you know, she wasn't going to do all the cooking, you know, so I cooked 3 days a week and she cooked the 4 days a week, or maybe we got takeout one day. And so I had to learn how to cook a few things from the early days.
Just three things every week. Just three things.
3 things, the same 3 things every.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, but then eventually that went by the wayside. I got lazy, and she just assumed my responsibilities cooking. But I had to I washed the dishes and did other things, but to help out around the house. But yeah, we had a very good partnership, the two of us. It wasn't any sort of typical way, even though it was sort of typical and traditional at the end. I mean, after she quit work, when you were born, after she quit work to be a full-time mom, a stay-at-home mom, which seemed old-fashioned at the time, being a feminist, being women's lib and all this kind of stuff, it sounds like old-fashioned, and she kind of felt guilty about that. But she could, because when she started out, you went to daycare, and eventually she said, "I don't want other people raising my child, because they're not going to raise my child the way I want to raise my child." So even being a feminist and a women's liberal, she decided to stay home and raise you guys from herself, and she always felt guilty about that, because she was a women's liberal. She was a feminist, and she knew if you're a work at home mom, society doesn't view you the way you would if you were a mom out in the workforce and making money and stuff like that. So when she would meet with, she always, you know, not felt guilty, but she felt, you know, she was always defensive about her career choices.
You know, that's interesting, because I've read Mickey Kendall, I've read Bell Hooks, I've read Audre Lorde in the last year, and it's interesting because, you know, mom's white, and a lot of the white feminist movement prioritized women working and equal pay and all that kind of stuff, but feminist movement in general was broader than that, especially in the sense of considering that Black women had been working since forever, because slavery and, you know, the economic conditions that we didn't even really get to yet about your parents. Both your parents graduated from college and both worked, you know, off and on for, you know, and if your mom wasn't working, your dad was working 2 or 3 jobs, because even with a college degree, you know, the black people with a college degree, you know, weren't paid the same amount or whatever. So Black women have been working. So the feminist movement didn't mean, oh, we want to work. It means we want fair pay. Yeah, for sure. Feminist movement is literally stripping away patriarchy, stripping away the idea that women are subservient, stripping away the tangential ideas of homophobia, transphobia, and stuff like that, because those are all related. Those are also kind of related to gender norms and masculine and feminine norms. But really just allowing women and feminine energy to be free, whether that is to be at home or to work.
And that's exactly the point. And that point at the early ages of the women's lib and feminist revolution, it was sort of lost. And you have to be reminded that the purpose of feminism and the purpose of women's lib is to give women choices, whatever choice they happen to make. But it seemed like everything was skewed to women having the ability to go to work and be free and make their own money and rise up the corporate ladder and be on par and equal with men. But that choice also included, staying home and her friends at work would sort of look down on her because she was at home raising the kids in the old traditional way, the way my parents did, my mom did. And so it was, it's not what you do, it's the choices that you have, that you have all the freedom to make, and that men have the same choices, the same freedom to choose. The men that could stay home and not be the breadwinner or whatever, it frees up both sexes.
Yeah. That's a good point. And it's interesting. I need to talk with Mom. Hopefully I'll have her on the show too at some point to talk about that from her perspective.
Oh, going back to the racism stuff. My parents were both college educated. And this goes to the thing where you have to be better to be equal. Blacks have to be better to be equal.
Work twice as hard to get half as much kind of
thing. Exactly. Yeah. My dad had a college education and my mom had a college education, but my dad was working at the post office. He was working with guys, and he probably wouldn't have gotten this job if he didn't go to college. But he needed a college to be equal to guys that he was working with that had no college.
White guys
that had no college. So we were always like lower middle class, and at first I thought we were lower middle class because we had my dad's income and he had 7 kids, so the family size made us lower middle class because there was not enough money for everybody with my dad's job. But it goes further than that, because your mom's family were more middle class,
and not my mom's parents, none of them went to college.
Exactly, none of them went to college, and they were middle class, and in similar circumstances, her mom stayed home, and sometimes she worked part time and stuff like that. But mostly the dad worked one job, and provided for the family, and they were
4 kids, not 7.
4 kids, so it's a slightly smaller family.
Still 4 kids,
right? But they were middle class. Yeah. They both bought their own homes. Which was rare for a black person at that time to own their own home.
You know what year was he bought that house?
I was trying to think of the year. Before that we were in the projects. It was in Tammany Hill in Newport. He was able to buy a house in Newport. There's a small black community in Newport. I think there's probably 5% of the population is black, and we were hilltoppers. Most of the black people lived down the hill, and we were on top, up the hill, so we call hilltoppers. And
so that was a moniker of prestige, being on the top of the hill as opposed to the bottom.
Yeah. Most of the people on the uphill owned their own homes, or rented nicer homes and not lower income homes. And I remember my mom. We never talked black because my parents were from university, so they always talked proper English. But we always learned about race growing up. I remember when I was young and going to the A&P and having this old white woman. She must have been 85, 90 years old, and she rubbed my hair for good luck.
Wow.
And my dad taught us about this type of behavior and stuff like that. Growing up in liberal Newport, the racism there was subtle, and it was still there. Oh, I remember my dad stole this thing when he was going to school in New Orleans. It was a wooden thing that you could stick different places in the bus depending on how many whites were in the bus, and it was the line where the blacks could sit in the back of the bus. And I remember, he stole that and he showed it to us, and he showed us what it meant.
Because both of them went to Xavier in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, that's where they met, in Xavier. My mom was from Macon, Georgia. My dad was from Newport, Rhode Island. So my dad grew up in liberal white Newport, whereas my mom was from Macon, Georgia. So she's from the South.
She already kind of knew the deal.
Yeah, right.
But for him being in New Orleans was like a culture shock.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember bringing that bus sign into school because we had it said for colored patrons only, and it had two little pegs on the bottom of the wood so that you could and each seat back in the bus would have two holes, so you could just put it in at that level, and as more white people got in, they just slid it on back,
right,
making less and less room for the black folk. And I think he has more than that. Uncle Magic has a bunch more. I'm not sure if he got those from Grampy or from elsewhere, but I know he's collected quite a few of those signs.
And I was like so proud of him for stealing it.
Hell yeah!
I mean, they were defiant. My dad and the groups he ran around with at Xavier University, they were quite defiant, and they would do things, and so I was proud of what he did when he was a kid and when he was young.
I appreciate that too, and I wish. So I guess so. Your mom died in 91, right? I think 91. I was 5, and there's my age again. And then Grampy died 2011. So unfortunately, they're not here to. I mean, I wish we could talk to them and get their perspective. But I really appreciate just even being able to share with you, just to kind of get your perspective on things. Because those pieces of history are really important to remember. And I guess all the things that I've learned now, and I guess the age I'm at now, it's got me really interested in hearing about those perspectives. One thing I'll mention, I know I remember when Grammy died, and you came home from work, and you were sitting on your side of the bed, and you had your head in your hands, and you just cried. And that's the only time I think I remember seeing you cry. But it was also just okay that you were crying. And there was no, I mean, getting back to the whole patriarchy thing, like there was no like, oh, men don't cry kind of thing. There was none of that. There was you cried and it was okay. It was like, and obviously it's okay, right? And as a kid, I just remembered seeing that and just feeling the loss and the grief in the moment, and just the emotional everything that was happening in that moment, and just without any words being expressed, it was me learning that was okay. And even with that knowledge, like I still resist crying. I still resist that to an extent because of all the other patriarchal forces that teach you otherwise, but that gave me a very early acceptance to just emotions in that raw form, and I appreciate that because, and you weren't even cognizant. You weren't cognizantly doing anything other than what was right, but just you being you and just doing what you do and did. Like I don't even know if you knew that, but like that's something that sticks with me to this day. And I try to remember that when I'm feeling feelings and just remembering it's okay to feel how I'm feeling. But what's important is how I respond to that, how I let it or not let it fester or control my behavior or whatever in a negative way. So,
yeah. And I remember growing up as a parent and all that, and not crying or trying not to cry, and preventing, like there's a movie, a very touching movie, and your mom would be crying, and I would, it touching me too, but I would fight. I fight it. I'm a man. I'm not supposed to be crying. I fight. And then as you get older.
Did Coco make you cry?
No.
Coco's a good one.
No.
That's a tearjerker. Sorry, go ahead.
But as you get older, it's I don't know what it is as you get older, but you get more. You get more that you can't. You just cry more with movies, with seeing your kids do something or really good or whatever. You can't hold it. It comes more free. I'm not sure. Maybe it's testosterone or you're losing testosterone. I don't know what it is, but you tend to seem the older you get, you tend to be more comfortable crying.
Interesting. Yeah.
And have less control over it too.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to cry, but
happen.
you have less control over it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned on one of the, I can't remember which episode this year it was, but like, you know, when Ahmaud Arbery was killed and they did on May 8th, which was his birthday, everybody was supposed to run 2.23 miles, which was, he was killed on February 23rd. So it was 2.23 for that. And at the end of that run, like I kind of started to tear up, and it was also drizzling. So I could have been like, oh, it was just raining. But like, no, I was legitimately touched by that. And even just allowing myself to cry, like through my divorce and just, you know, the struggles, you know, the ups and downs of that whole process. And, yeah, no, that's true. But for movies, I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, like I remember Kendra told me, oh, Coco, that's going to make you cry. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'll be all right. And yeah, Coco it gets to you. It's Coco.
Maybe,
that's just a really,
maybe
really
Coco did. I think Moana might have.
Moana too. Yeah, that's a good one too. Moana. I didn't even know Moana. I read this think piece about Moana. It's about patriarchal violence. Like Maui literally stole the heart of Te Fiti, which is literally like assault or it's a symbol of male violence against a female deity or whatever. And then she turned into Te Kā, which was like an evil, you know, energy force in the world. So I was like, damn, that's powerful. And it's yeah. Anyway, so that's a really good movie too for multiple reasons. But anyway,
but I remember my mom saying, as growing up, that integration. She was never really comfortable with integration. She said integration is a double-edged sword. I mean, she was from the South, and she was learning to cope and live in Newport, and we were integrated. Most of the time in school, I was the only black kid in my class, or one of the only black kids in the college prep class. It was me and David Yates. The two of us were the only black kids in the college prep classes, and so we were integrated, and you know, going through life like you're one of the good blacks. You're an exception to the rule. You know, you don't talk black. You're intelligent. You're intellectual. So you're different. So they would accept me, but still think their prejudice or racist thoughts about black people in general. And my mom saying that it's a double-edged sword meant that integration destroyed a lot of black communities that were doing well.
It did. As
black communities, black people supporting each other and businesses and all this kind of stuff. And so she when Martin Luther King was promoting integration and all this, and she was for that, but not for it at the same time.
Was Macon a segregated? Was it a black town? Was it?
I think mostly the black community at the time. My mom was
I mean, that's true. I mean, I looking back at history, I've forced myself to be really honest about the civil rights movement and what it did and what it did not do. And one thing I've been saying a lot recently is the civil rights movement changed laws, not sentiments. And unfortunately, the change of laws gave us a false sense of, you know, accomplishment. And really, the black community took a big hit. Financially, community-wise, you know, all that. I mean, I remember reading, I did a report on Vivian Thomas, one of my favorite movies of all time, Something the Lord Made, with Mos Def and Alec Baldwin.
Right. I
wow,
like that one too.
One of my favorite movies of all time. But anyway, Vivian Thomas, who basically single-handedly invented open heart surgery in Baltimore. But when he was growing up in Tennessee, you know, and in his autobiography, he credited segregated black schools, primary schools, for his, you know, his intellectual skills, because he was like, I know for people who went to white schools with white teachers, they were treated like crap. And they were, it's kind of like what you experienced when you were going to college. It was like, oh, maybe you should do a little easier, something, whatever. He was like, I had black teachers who beat my ass because I didn't, to make sure I was getting the material, because they actually cared, because they were invested in my success, because they were black too.
Right.
And I'm paraphrasing, but he basically, he received value from segregated black schools. Maybe they weren't equal in terms of resources, but they were superior in terms of investment from a teacher to student perspective. And so from that and what your mom's sentiment was, I think that those are all valid points. I mean, my very first episode, I talked about the Negro Leagues and how the Negro Leagues were one of the most successful, long-lasting black businesses in the country, and from a scale standpoint, if nothing else. And how Rube Foster wanted to integrate Major League Baseball by bringing fully black-owned teams into Major League Baseball. And then 20 years later, Jackie Robinson as an individual breaks the color barrier, and the Negro Leagues as a business entity is eliminated, basically. And that is a symbol for what integration did across the board. So your mom was right. I mean,
But yet, when we were in Newport, she didn't want us to be affiliated with the black people downtown, and
the Hill Bottomers, was that?
I don't know what they would call, but she, because she was an intellectual, she was a teacher, a school teacher. I think she felt that, I don't know, that they would bring us down. They were, it's such a dichotomy, like with her, that they were not beneath us, but they had negative influence. They would have negative influence. They'd bring you down. They were too trifling. They were too small-minded. I don't know. She never really expressed it in words, but I get the sense that this is how she felt, that they weren't gonna help us as kids advance and grow. They were gonna be mired in and maybe alcoholism was involved in stuff like that in those communities and stuff like that. And
but the alcoholism was in your own house too.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
that's
like,
true.
let's be real. But I get that, and I think that that's a conflict that we have in general as a community. We've had that discussion, since Booker T. Washington and Du Bois and all that. Like, but I think one thing Ibram X. Kendi mentions in his book that I think is an infrequently spoken idea is behavioral racism. We look at people's behavior and condemn them for said behaviors, when in reality, behaviors are a
reaction,
a reaction and result of conditions.
And maybe we're not condemning the people's behavior, but because they behave that way, we don't want to affiliate with them. They're just as much as a victim, but still, they're a victim of racism in the society. But still,
in the intimate space of raising your kid, you want the best for your kid.
Exactly.
And so you're like, yeah, I get all that, but like, I just want my kid to be all right.
Right. I want my kids to excel and so forth. I don't blame them for being the way they are, but I don't want my kids around that negativity, that or whatever.
That's tough. And I get that to an extent. Like, I had a friend who was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't let my kid, cross dress or whatever. And I was like, well, would you let your kid be Ruby Bridges? Would you let your kid be the first black kid to integrate a school? And she said no. And I'm like, well, so, okay, but like, in order to make this world the world that we want it to be, where there's no transphobia, no homophobia, no racism, patriarchy, whatever, like, at some point, somebody's got to put their bodies on the line. Somebody's got to put their kids on the line. One person I highly respect is Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, who's the president of UMBC. He was 13 years old when the 4 little girls were killed in Birmingham, and he defied his own parents as a 13-year-old to go march with Dr. King, spent a night in jail. Because no parent wants their child to be in harm's way. But as a 13-year-old, he was like, you know what? Dr. King came to my church and said, we need everybody, especially young people, to get involved. 4 little girls were killed. Like, kids are literally dying. So he was like, you can't tell me not to go. And so he did. So, I mean, yeah, I get the notion of wanting to protect your kids and like, oh, if I let my kid cross dress, like they're gonna get ridiculed or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's true, but if that's their truth, like I don't want to be the oppressive force in my own child's life, preventing them from expressing themselves how they want.
And their very first experience with oppression is from their own parents.
Yeah, so I'd rather like, and it would take some work and some coaching and some work to get it to that point. But it's like, okay, you can do this. This is how you feel. Go ahead and do it. But you're going to get some feedback from the world that's not going to be fair. It's not going to feel great. And we can talk about it. We can work through it. But like, I want you to be expressive in the way you are. But yes, you have to prepare them at the same time for what they're gonna experience out there. And so, yeah, so for her to try to like shield you from, I guess the less desirable elements of, less desirable Black communities. I mean, I get it from an intimate, like I need the best for my kids. It's just tough. It's just tough because at the same time, you also have sympathy for those who are struggling even worse under the system that you are. So, looking to kind of wrap up this discussion, I think we should do more of these. I think we should do like a series. this is definitely fun to do. What like major life lessons have stuck with you over the years? And if it fits in, cool. I also want to try to touch on what it's been like to see Avery and see me and Avery together in the I guess the 6 months that you've been here. Yeah, well, maybe that's a separate topic. But so I guess what major life lessons have stuck with you that you remember looking back?
Of late, this is what I call chapter 2. When I retired from work, I retired early from work. I wrote my goodbye. I called it chapter 2, and I explained why I was leaving work early. And I had a good job, good pay, mostly working from home, so very little supervision. And people thought I was crazy for leaving work before real retirement age, but I did, and I explained why. And basically, life's too short, and basically, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And so many times in life we get so focused on the destination. Like when Troy graduated from college, I wanted to tell them that when you're young, you always want the destination. You want to graduate from high school. You want to graduate from college. You want to buy a house and buy a car and get married and all these destinations. And you're impatient to get to the destination. But what's really important in life is the journey. Is how you go through life and what you do to other people in your journey is what's more important than the destination. Because basically, the destination for all of us is the grave. And so why be in a rush to get to the grave? That's the ultimate destination. But what's more important is how you treat people in your journey, along your journey, and enjoying the journey is much more important than any goal or destination that you have. And we lose sight of that. We lose track of that in the United States, in our rat race world that we live in. And basically getting back to basics, getting back to what life is all about is treating people well along the way. Not stepping on people to get up to the next level, not kicking people when they're down, not treating people with respect, even though they're not going to help you with your advancement goals or whatever. It's all about that. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's really profound, and I think a lot of people do get lost in that hustle, and for me, by the time I was 31 or 32, by the time I was 32, I'll say, I had graduated from college, bought a home, gotten married, had a kid, gotten divorced, got a graduate school degree, and had gotten into leadership as in a career. And I was looking around, this is like 10 years after college, and I'm like, I've literally checked all the boxes that most people want to check at some point in their adult lives. And I wasn't necessarily happy with it. Or I guess I was happy in life, but I wasn't really, each of those boxes didn't really fulfill me. I guess, well, not everybody wants to get divorced, but I mean, I had gone through so much. I had done so many things in terms of like those destination type pursuits. And when I got divorced, I was like, you know what? Could I get married again? Originally I was like, I don't want to get married again. And I could. I would get married again, but I'm not looking to check the box just to check the box. I'm looking to live my life, to really truly experience that journey, being honest and true to who I am as a person, and not let the societal quote unquote norms guide my behavior or guide my, whatever. Like, I mean, I came out of college wanting to be you, wanting to be you and mom. Like, oh, like they met in college. Like I should meet my wife in college and like get married right after college, like they did, and then work for a company and then have kids and like buy a house. And I modeled myself after what you all did, because, it provided me a stable and healthy, childhood. Only to find out that, that total destination style of living is not fulfilling ultimately for you, for your soul, and you were like, at that same time, you were preparing to retire early, to live in other parts of the world where it was cheaper to live, and to just literally do what you wanted to do. So, so you were setting yourself up to kind of self-actualize your life. And I was still kind of convincing myself of that destination pursuit form of life. But now I'm right there with you. And I feel like I'm blessed to be in my 30s and be there at this stage. I know a lot of people might not get there until they are actually retirement age in their 60s or later. And they realize, what the hell did I just do all this work for? And so, yeah, I don't know. This has just been you can't plan life, but I just think that this period, where I'm at in my life and where you are at in yours, and the fact that COVID and travel and everything placed you here for the 6 months that you've been here. And I do hope you get back home, but I sincerely appreciate you being here. Where you're at in life has helped give me a lot of perspective, and has meshed well with like where I'm at and where I see myself going and the values that I have. And and raising Avery, it's like, just going through the things that distance learning, like we see him throughout the day, we see him in school, which is weird, like nobody does that. But so there's so much, there's when you're out of the country, like Carson's, we don't even talk all that much when you're not in town, right. Which is, I mean, we could easily talk on WhatsApp like every day if we wanted to, and I know you talk to Troy a lot more. Whatever, we don't do that for some reason. I don't know, but whatever it is, like you're here, and this time has been extremely valuable, and I love you and I appreciate you, and I appreciate these kinds of talks, and I hope we do this again. We're already kind of like this is a long episode, and that's okay. It's going to be what it is. But I definitely want to do this again, because that second chapter is deserves another episode or another conversation entirely.
Sure. And I really am enjoying myself being here with you and Avery and helping out, and it's just so much fun to get back to having a stronger relationship with you over these 6 months, and Avery as well. And it's so hard being away and not being involved on a day-to-day basis with you guys. So I appreciate all of this, and I do love you, and hope not to be away as long in the future as I have been in the past.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know Avery loves it too. I mean, I remember like when you were talking, he overheard you talking about leaving, and he started to cry. I was like, oh man. But no, but yeah, hopefully you're able to come back at some intervals that don't stress out home life, but also you're able to financials and everything else involved. But yeah, so. I guess just to close it down, one of the things I always ask guests at the end is what what question? Sorry, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Actually, we had this conversation at dinner with Avery. I wish we recorded that.
Exactly.
I don't even remember what you said though. So if you had a superpower, what would it be?
I think now it would be going back in time, being able to time travel backwards and learn from history. Seeing the musical, the movie Hamilton, and being with Avery, my grandson, and all the questions he has about Hamilton and the past and the history and stuff like that. It makes me curious more about history. I used to be. I think I wanted to be able to go through walls and be transparent, be like a fly on the wall. But I think learning and in the past it might have been going into the future, being so curious about the future, but not so much. I think the past is more interesting to me now.
I know you read a lot. What's the last book you read, and do you recommend it?
Oh my gosh! Your book,
Undefeated.
Undefeated.
Oh yeah.
Undefeated was the last book I read, and I highly recommend it. It's a great book. It's a very good book.
Yeah, that's about the Carlisle Indian School. It's about Jim Thorpe, Pop Warner, and how the football that we know, American football that we know of today, is literally a creation of. It was created by mostly the Carlisle Indian School. It's just Native American students at that school. As problematic as that school was for a number of reasons, the ingenuity and the athletic ability of those kids, Jim Thorpe being the best known of them, they basically created the competitive passing football,
modern football.
The parts of modern football that people love to this day were created by that school, those students, Pop Warner, and their ability to compete toe to toe with the larger, well-funded Ivy League schools at the time. So it's a very riveting story. I think it's well told too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised.
For sure. The last question. Well, at the end of every episode, I usually say a song I'm rocking to. But since you're the guest, you get to pick and recommend a song that you are listening to.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I guess it would have to be from Hamilton, The Room Where It Happened. because I mean, I'm not rocking to much of anything new but that song just hits me because of the lyrics and the significance of it.
Yeah.
I mean, even today, when we're talking about police brutality and law and order, and you have one side that's law and order related, and I always think, well, who wrote those laws? Who was in the room when it happened?
Mm-hmm.
Were minorities in the room when writing those? All the laws we have on our books. How many women were in the room when it happened? And then you ask, how many racists were in the room when it happened?
Yeah.
How many sexists were in the room when it happened? And so the people that stand so fervently on law and order and right and wrong and stuff like that, the whole foundation of our system, our government, we weren't in the room when it happened.
Yeah.
We were excluded from the room. Women, minorities, gay, lesbians, whatever. We weren't in the room when it happened. So to stand so firmly on these laws that weren't of all the people, by all the people, or for all the people, is why this song resonates with me so much.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, not only is it a good song, but it's also it can be applied everywhere. So we've probably watched Hamilton 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 times with Avery over the last 2 months, maybe just a month, I don't know. And so that boy's probably got the whole damn thing memorized. And it's funny because throughout regular conversation, you could just bust into song like if somebody didn't do something right, you will never be satisfied or whatever. It's just a reason to break out into Hamilton song throughout any given day. And so and just literally just yesterday, Avery realized, I think I might have been mom that told him or something. But in Hamilton, there's enough context clues that George Washington owned people. He was he enslaved people. And so Avery was like, did George Washington own slaves? And I said, yes, he did. And he was like, how many presidents owned slaves? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I know plenty did, but I don't know the number. And I looked it up, and he was right there with me. 12 U.S. presidents owned people. And I added up how many, Wikipedia's site had how many approximately they owned. 12 U.S. presidents combined owned over 2,000 people.
Wow.
And I'm just like, damn, this is the history. So talk about Law and Order. And I was trying to explain this to Avery. He was, because at this point he's asking about slavery, what that was. And I was like, you know, the idea that you own people, like slavery meant that you were like, people were owned by other people, and everything that they did was controlled by whoever owned them. You couldn't do anything. So as a kid, you couldn't go to school, couldn't learn to read or write, couldn't play, do anything. As long as once you were old enough to do anything, you were working in the farms, you were picking cotton, you were sweeping the floor, you were doing, you know, the few chores you have in this house that you hate. Like your life would be just chores, and you wouldn't get any money for it. Your parents wouldn't get any money for it, and that's what slavery was. And trying to get him to understand how that could be allowed in this country, because obviously we know that doesn't make sense and that doesn't morally feel right. But the laws let it happen. So talk about law and order, you know, subscribing to laws just because they're the laws is just a cop out for moral righteousness and moral, I should say, justice. You know, just because it's on the books doesn't mean it's just.
Right.
And so yeah, who was in the room where it happened when? And I even you know, we got into Jefferson. Jefferson's a huge character in Hamilton. You know. He was like, did Thomas Jefferson own slaves? I was like, yes, absolutely. You know, and I'd read to him the first part of the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal and endowed by their creator certain inalienable rights. And I was like, so Avery, what part of that doesn't make sense, knowing that Jefferson owned slaves? And you're like, well, he said all men, that didn't include black people. And I said, yeah. And saying all men also doesn't include women, right? And he's like, yeah, that's true. So just showing him at his age, like, people in history, people in general aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And some people are just blatantly, they just say things that don't actually jive with what they're actually doing.
Or they get them to jive by saying blacks aren't human.
Well, yeah, and I didn't get into that.
You know, blacks are chattel. They're animals.
Yeah, I didn't use that terminology with him. Maybe I should have. Maybe 7's too young, too old. I don't know. Not too old, but yeah. And that's one of those things that's a challenge for me. And I don't mean to make it sound daunting, but it's just something I'm constantly thinking about and assessing as a dad. Like, how much do I expose him to, and when? I don't know. But anyway, so all these things are running through my head. But Hamilton's great, and I'm glad that you love that song. I definitely see that it applies to so much. And yeah. Anyway, well, thanks a lot, Dad, for joining me on this episode.
And thanks for having me. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
Good discussion.
And there's definitely seeds for future discussions. I hope we can do some more to kind of like flesh out some more of these ideas. That second chapter idea is good. I want to get more into raising kids and just, you know, and you alluded to working from home. You know, that's a big thing now with the pandemic. Everybody, companies are realizing working from home is a thing. You were doing that in what, like the early 2000s?
Before the Twin Towers collapsed, before 9/11.
So I was in the 90s. Yeah. So like that, I mean, so you've been on that train for a long time. And actually, Mom found a picture of Grandma when she was working from home in the what was it, 60s, 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just interesting how you know those histories are kind of reemerging, and those concepts are reemerging today in this new pandemic world. But anyway, thank you all for listening to Who Knows It's Just Life. Again, I appreciate my dad for joining me on this episode. As always, you can get at me on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. I'd love for you to give me any feedback on this or other episodes, and if you have any ideas for new episodes, you know, get at me. I hope to catch you here next time. Until then, be safe, be well, peace.